Keith Rucker at VintageMachinery.org. So today I'm up in the North Georgia mountains just outside of Blairsville, Georgia, and I'm visiting Paul Hamler. Paul has Hamler Tool Company, or was it Hamler Tools?
Hamler Tools, right.
Yeah, and he is a pretty interesting guy. I've actually been following his work for many years. This is first time I guess I have met you before at some tool shows, but he doesn't remember it. I remember it. But I've been following his work for many years, and if you guys are and particularly in the woodworking side of things, you've probably seen some of his tools in the back of fine woodworking and places like that, because he just does an absolutely phenomenal job at making his own tools, but also miniature tools is kind of a specialty. So tell us a little bit about how you got into this, Paul.
Well, years ago when the kids were young, I got hooked on, I started building some Queen Anne Chippendale chairs. And about the only power tool that's required for that is a bandsaw. But to finish up the chair backs, the cabriole legs and so forth, I started searching the flea markets and all for spoke shaves and scrapers. And I got bit by the antique tool, collection. And the beauty that they put in the tools. Here's a prime example. This was one of my back then my list of desirable tools, but with the kids small in school and everything, I didn't have the funds to buy some of this high dollar stuff. So I saw a picture. It's called an ultimatum brace. It's made in England, and it's infilled with ebony. They also infilled them with rosewood, different woods. So I couldn't afford one, so I saw a picture of one in the catalog, antique catalog. And it just happened that in the photograph of the tool was a third scale. So when you see the scale that I've worked with over the years, 99% of what I've done is 1/3 scale. So here's the full-size ultimatum, and here's the miniature. And I'm a big believer of Henry Ford. I think he understood mass production, and anytime I make a tool over the years, I never make one tool. I either do a minimum of 25 up to the highest I've done is 500. So this particular tool here, I think I did like 300. And so I try to reproduce them in every way. But this is what got me hooked, and this is what we got started, and I never looked back. Now, I've got a shot here. This used to be my traveling case, and this case just represents probably about half of what I've made over the last 30 years. In every case here, again, there are multiples. I did like 350 of these. A couple of pieces I only did 50. But what I try to do in most cases, because some of these tools were so rare and extremely hard to get my hands on, like this was a tool that sold at an auction. It was one of a kind. It was a prototype that N.B. Tidy made for his Tidy patent. And it was kind of a Rube Goldberg plane that just never made the market because it wasn't practical. I mean, his idea was to be able to have a plate over here at one angle, and then you could set the plate over here at a different angle. I mean, how often do you need that in woodworking? Yeah. So one of my best customers authorized me to buy the real tool at an auction. I was on the front row. I bought this tool for $30,000 for my neighbor. And it was really fun sitting there bidding with somebody else's money. But anyway, I made 50 of these. And in most cases, every tool that I've made, the really rare stuff, I didn't have in my collection. So once I got into the business for a while, people would loan me real high dollar tools, and I would always keep the first tool, and I would give them the second one. Here's a good example. If you get it out of there. This was about a $10,000 to $12,000 tool when I made this particular piece. This one is an example that I borrowed from a customer and made miniatures of it, and he got the second one I made. Later on, I've taken this same piece and made a full size. Actually, here it is right here. This is the only piece I've ever made 500 of, and this is full size. This is third scale. One of the things I always like to point out is all of my tools are completely operational, just like the full-size tool. For instance, in this Davis inclinometer, the Davis inclinometer has got a working vial in it. The inclinometer portion also turns and rotates. The same thing on the little Stratton Brothers. It's got operational valves, in the plumb and in the level portion.
So you made the valves yourself?
Right. That was an experience. But here's an interesting tool. I literally sold hundreds of these over the years. I don't have a round one here, but these are little plumb bobs that ladies used to love to wear, the tool collecting ladies. These particular pieces here were done on a CNC mill at a rotary table with a fly cutter, and you can index them and put as many facets as you want to on here. And your cutter travels in the Z-axis. It starts at the top and works its way up, and once it cuts one flat or one profile, it indexes to the next flat. Over the years, this was a very popular piece. It's it's a gold smoothing plane, and I used to demonstrate it, but I never had a piece of wood with me. So over the years, I kind of used my workbench or my attaché case. So they're all operational. Over the years, like as I pointed out earlier, I actually had access to the tool that I was making a miniature reproduction of. This is a good example of a recent project I just completed. This is a baby Wilson, and somebody was in the shop the other day, and they explained to me there was some guy in California that actually had made these from scratch out of metal blocks. I could not believe that. Anyway, took him a long time to do it. I cranked out a couple of dozen of these last week, and we'll show an overview of how the process that I went through on making these little baby Wilton vices. When I did this project, I originally hadn't planned on putting the removable jaws in, but I later added it. And give you an idea of the scale of this thing, the jaws in this larger vise are 0.80 threads that hold the jaws in. The jaws in the smaller one, I believe, are 0090. The 3 screws up in the front movable jaw that holds the C-clip and the ring in there are 000-120 screws. And the most challenging thing on doing this piece was to drill the holes for the jaw inserts without drilling all the way through, but we pulled it off. Anyways, that's my baby Wiltons. Now, if you got a Wilton, you've got to have a pair of vice grips to go with them. Is that in the field?
Yeah.
Okay. These vice grips, again, like everything I make, is completely operational. And if you release the lever on it too fast, like you do on the big ones, it pops out, just like on the big ones. But you can set the tensions and see, just like the big one. But the interesting thing about this project, in making the logo, and I don't know if Keith can get in here, we might have to do a still shot, but in doing the logo, on each side, the side that's got the handshake and it says vice grips, that was, in making the model, that was machined into the model using a 2.5 thousandths wide single lip cutter that was ground under the microscope to machine that into the model. It was done on this little CNC mill right next to us, and same thing on the back. It's got the original logo on the back, DeWitt Manufacturing Company, I believe it is. So I've just kind of branched out. I got away from doing the woodworking tools for a while. I started doing a few machinist tools, like this little scribe, very functional marking device and layout device for edges and borders when you're engraving or working into miniatures. One of the things that we do here in the shop, on most every model or a miniature that we make, a lot of them we utilize the investment or lost wax casting process. This is a quick overview of the birth and of the Wilton vise. This is the master, the model that I started with. Try to put all the detail that you can into the master and the model, the logo and everything. The next step, by the way, this model was made on the pantograph. We'll take a look at the pantograph here in a minute. But it was done on a three-dimensional pantograph. I actually had a baby Wilton from a copy, and I scaled it down to this scale. After you get your model complete, the next process is making a mold. And basically what you do is you take your model and suspend it with a piece of wax so it's standing up straight. And when it's standing up straight, you encompass it with a specially prepared PVC pipe. There's about a 1.5 degree taper inside of this pipe. Then you pour RTV, room vulcanizing temperature, RTV, room temperature vulcanizing, get it right in a minute, into the mold. The next day, you remove the mold, you remove the RTV, and you have to manually cut the mold in half to dissect it. In this case here, the black portion inside is a core, so that when the wax is injected, you already have your hole, plus inside of that black core, there's a keyway. So after these castings are done, I do not have to broach the keyway. It's cast into the, into the final casting. I don't know if you can see it on the end there or not. But once you've cut the mold apart and taken the master out, then you can make as many of these as you want. It's just for every wax that you inject, that you cast, you could literally make, probably out of this mold here, you could make 600 or 700 before the mold started deteriorating. After you've got your waxes, same process, you take the wax and you suspend it to this little base. You just melt it on there like you stick a candle down, and you melt it there. And then you put your flask around it. Of course, the flask is covered with masking tape to keep the investment. Investment is basically like a real fine grain plaster of Paris. As it's poured in and covers this unit, it hardens and sets overnight. The next day, you take this flask, you remove the rubber base from it, and you take this flask that now has a wax encapsulated inside of it, and you put it through a regimented burnout cycle to lose all the wax. Then, after it's burnt out, you put this flask down into a vacuum chamber so your opening is pointing up. With molten metal, you pour your molten metal in there to make your casting. This was not for the vise, but it was done for another piece. But you can put multiples, as many as you can get inside of that flask for space utilization. And this is a casting. It's still got the investment on it that hasn't been cleaned off. So it just takes a little buffing, a little cleanup, and this is ready to go. In a nutshell, this is lost wax or investment casting. I would say for over the models that I've made over the years, I probably use that process for 50 to 60% of the miniatures. And again, that was how we did the Wilton and the vice scripts. Okay, after years of doing miniature tools at 1/3 scale, I kind of got burnt out and got bored with making the tools because there really wasn't a lot of challenging stuff left to do. So I had always loved the beauty and the grace and the proportion of a Kentucky long rifle. This is a true American product. I chose the Lancaster that was made back in the 1750s up into 1850. And this particular Lancaster style rifle was made in what they call the golden era. It's when the rifle makers were competing for business after the Revolutionary War to get new business. So they started embellishing them and really, tricking them out to appeal to the customers. The thing I love about the Kentucky long rifles in gun making is it involves a little bit of everything we do here in the shop. You're working with wood and sculpting the stock and fitting the barrel to the stock. Metal working involved in casting the lock parts, including the springs. Inlaying the brass patch boxes, and also engraving the brass patch boxes. Here's an example on this rifle. again, they highly embellish these guys. And in the back, on the back side is your wood carvings, or some of the wood carvings. This is called an Isaac Haynes pattern. He was one of the famous Lancaster rifle builders. And to do the wood carving created a whole new set of challenges, and the fact that when you start carving something this small and this detail, you've got to make custom carving tools. And my first test on carving the pattern, I cut, it was on a reject stock, is shown here in the white. Maybe Keith can get a close-up of it later on. But basically what we've got here is all the components that's included in this rifle. This is the rifling cutter for rifling the barrel. We'll look later on the lathe, we'll look at a process that I use to develop and manufacture the barrels. All the brass parts were investment cast. The springs, the main spring and the frozen spring were cast. The sear spring and the patch box springs were made from spring stock. What I did when I started this project is I bought a Jim Chambers kit. He makes a full-size kit of this gun. And basically, I did just like on the miniatures, I took the full-size original and reproduced every piece in it. So this is a true Lancaster-style rifle pattern after Jim Chambers' kit. This is a full-size lock off the Chambers kit, and we'll look at the process when we get over to the pantograph, but basically we took this lock apart and reproduced every piece in it on the pantograph. This was the half scale. I made a half scale model and later cast it. This is cast in various tool steels. And then I made a model of the third scale, which is what fits into the rifle, and cast all the parts for this. These are some of the waxes, for the piece. This little area here shows all of the pieces that make up the lock. Here's the cock or the hammer on the lock, full size. As you can see this one here. And what we did on the pantograph, we pantographed this guy to the third scale, and this was half of the process, and then when you flipped it over and did the other half, you've got the final scaled down part. From here, we made a mold like we did on the Wilton Vice, shot the waxes, and these are the castings. So, again, Henry Ford, a lot of guys they only like making one, but my philosophy is if you're going to set something up and set your machines up and fixture it, it's just as easy to make 10 or 20 as it is to make one. And when you pass that 50 mark, it does get a little monotonous. We talked a little bit about the different miniature tools and miniature guns. Occasionally, I have made full-size tools. As I told Keith, everything on this bench is the only full-size tools I've ever made. Starting with the full-size Miller's patent. I did a router it was a joint venture with Chris Larman out in Oregon. He did the detail on the carving, and I did the molds and cast the product. Little slipper plane that I made. This is actually a modified version of an antique hand plane. These guys were real popular. This is a Victor early style block plane. What's unique about this plane is it was America's first entry into the patent where they patented the depth adjustment of the blade and the lateral adjustment all into one mechanism. And a lot of people think that Norris and England had that patent on their smoothing planes, but it was actually Stanley that came out with this concept of the lateral adjustment and the depth adjustment. And so this is a full-size example of that plane. A real popular piece over the years has been this patented scraper insert. And what I've done is made two different models, one for a regular Bailey plane and one for the bedrock. This particular one here is for the Bailey. What you do is remove the frog and the whole blade mechanism out of your plane. It works at a 4.5, a 6, and a 7. I think there are 3 models. And you drop this insert down, and what you've done is you've converted your joiner style plane, or in a case of a 4.5, it's a little shorter. This is a number 607. You can also put it in a number 8. So what you've done is converted your plane into a scraper. And for some reason, Stanley never took this concept. Their longest scraper was, I think, about 12, 14 inches long. But now for doing maple bench tops and workbench tops, this is a beautiful tool for leveling. This is a very stubborn piece of boxwood. And what we'll do is just demonstrate a couple of passes. So these are shavings, not sawdust. And the patented part of this is the adjusting mechanism. Stanley had 2 screws, and you had to loosen the front screw and synchronize it with the back screw in order to change the way the depth of cut works on this scraper. Is the further forward that you lean the plane, the deeper the cut. When you pull it back this direction, it reduces the cut. So by eliminating that front knob and putting a tension spring up there, I can literally on the fly go from a coarse cut to a fine cut just by turning that knob less than 180 degrees. In this corner of the shop, this is the engraving area. We got a stereo zoom microscope for zooming in where you can see what you're doing on small engraving. An engraving vise to hold your work, and it sets on a rotary table. The logic here is if you've got a big piece up here that you have to constantly move, if you've got the microscope centered onto the rotary table, regardless of where you put this vise, you're in focus and in your work area. Engraving is probably the most enjoyable thing I do in the shop. If somebody came to me and said, you can only have one tool, this would be the tool that I keep. This is a pneumatic, the best way to describe it is a miniature jackhammer. It's run off of air, it's a single piston in there. You control the reciprocating motion of the cutter with pressure onto the palm up here. And you can change the impact. That's a power stroke. And then as you close off your portals on the chamber, it gets a little bit finer. It's for finer engraving lines. This is a Lindsay palm control. Lindsay spent about, 7 or 8 years developing this tool. Of all the tools in the shop, this is my favorite tool. This will be the one that I'd keep if everything else was gone. Engraving is not that difficult to learn. I was explaining to Keith yesterday the 3 aspects of it. You got to learn how to sharpen your cutter. We've got that done with a cutter sharpener. Your artwork with technology and computers, you can put stuff on your transparencies. There's just masses of information out there for artwork and scroll work. Once you transfer it to your metal, the easiest part is actually cutting. As I explained to Keith, if you can cut a scroll pattern, a non-straight line, curvature line on a scroll saw or a bandsaw, you can engrave. It's eye-hand coordination, just following the line. It sounds simple, but basically that's what it is. What we'll do here, we'll let Keith set up and zoom in, and you can see the action of the tool as it's cutting the metal. Okay, the first aspect is I've printed some artwork on this transparency, and what I'm going to do is put a fine coating of primer color. It's basically an art pen. It prints in light gray. So I put that ink solution onto the brass, and then we'll take the transparency, align it on the piece of brass where I want to engrave, and burnish the transparency. Just rub it. And what it's doing is taking the ink on the back of this transparency and transferring it to the metal where I applied that marker solution. So now I have artwork on the metal, and it's just, from this point, it's just a matter of following the lines. If you can see the cutter as it's being, you notice I'm not turning the tool, I'm keeping the tool pretty much going straight, and I'm turning the the vise to follow the line. Are you picking that up, Keith?
Yep.
Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is make a really deep cut, straight line cut. And you kind of hurt. That's probably a deeper cut than you would normally make on any type of engraving. But now I'm going to follow right beside it with a really light cut. And it's all, your depth of cut depends on how long you hold it into the starting position, kind of like digging with a shovel. The longer you push down on the top of the shovel, the deeper it goes into the ground before you level it off, determines the depth of your trench. In this case here, I'm just going to go down just really slightly and I'm going to level off. And right now I'm riding on the heel of the cutter and I'm making a lot lighter cut. And you can tell by the sound of the tool that it's not working as hard. And actually I can take this thing down even further than that. I was engraving the inside of a lock the other day, and it had some pins in it that were a little under 1/8 of an inch in diameter, and I engraved Hamler tools on the end of that dowel. And I was using a lot smaller cutter than this, but under the microscope and the control that this tool provides, you can do a lot of, a lot of fine engraving with it. But again, Lindsay palm control, I wouldn't take anything for it.
Well, I think that's going to probably be a wrap on this video, but my main thing I wanted you guys to see here was a little bit of the scope of the work of what Paul's doing in his shop, because this is a lot different than what most of us. He's doing a lot of miniature work. He's doing a lot of really fine, detailed work, just unbelievable craftsmanship as far as I'm concerned. But now we're going to actually get to more of a shop tour and kind of show you some of the tools that he uses in his shop to accomplish some of this. So anything you want to add?
No, I think we covered pretty much most of the process that I go through, and I'm sure there's stuff we left out, but
there's tons that we left out. But you're going to start shooting videos, right?
I hope
get you in the business.
I hope to, right? Keith and I had talked about potentially doing a video on lost wax investment casting, so I think that's really going to be a fun video to do. Yeah. But my goal is eventually to start doing some really quick 10-15 minute videos just of some of the techniques and the special tools that I've designed and built and used in the miniature making process. And you guys will have to bear with me because this is all new to me, but maybe we can figure it out and share some of this information. I think Keith and I both, I think one of the things that we have in common is we love to share information, and that's I think it's a good way to do it. And, so hopefully we'll see you in the future.
Good deal. Well, let's go. We'll wrap this one up and follow up. We'll have a shop tour video with Paul. So thanks for watching. We'll see you guys in the next one.